All right. Hello, everyone. So here we are at the final session of the day, and I have the pleasure of introducing two phenomenal people to the stage tonight. So first, Josh, who is our partner at Greylock, who, if you didn't know, has a particular knack for social media platforms and mobile apps. He worked at companies such as LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter, and even magnified the user base 10 times during his time there. And it's befitting that he will introduce and interview a man who made 140 characters one of the most disruptive forms of communication in social media, Biz Stone, who is the co-founder of Twitter, but also the CEO and co-founder of Jelly Industries, which is essentially a consumer app that's not only useful, but fun. Now, Biz Stone is beyond an entrepreneur. He is creatively highly talented, who is also an author, a filmmaker, and a painter. He has won numerous awards, including Inc. Magazine's Entrepreneur of the Decade, Time Magazine's Most Influential People of the World, and he was even JQ's Nerd of the Year. So please stand up, get on your feet, and give me a warm welcome for Josh and Biz Stone.
Where should I sit? Where should I sit?
Take the far one.
The far one?
Yeah.
Okay. Hello. Hi. Thank you so much. That was very nice of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Josh.
So,
Whoa.
you know, I think we're the last one of today, so we're keeping everybody from drinking and partying. So.
Oh, sorry. I'll just go.
Try to make it fun. You know, I first met Biz.
I'm sorry. I can't hear you when I'm doing that.
I first met Biz 6 years ago now when I started talking to Twitter and then ended up joining Twitter, and it, you know, changed my life, and I'm sure Twitter changed yours as well. And now, you know, I feel
it did have an impact on my life.
And now I feel very lucky to be working with Biz again on Super, where, you know, we've invested and they're building something great that I know we'll talk about too. But I thought, you know, just to start with this crowd of entrepreneurs, you know, you're now Mr. Biz Stone and just a
Dr.
Biz Stone.
Honorary degree.
Genius, right? Is that right?
Self-proclaimed.
Self-proclaimed genius. You know, I thought it'd be great just to talk a little about kind of, you know, there's no way when you were graduating high school that you thought you'd end up here, and kind of go all the way back and kind of when you were just getting your start as an entrepreneur, you know, what were you thinking? Why did you decide to even go found companies and try to go down that path?
Well, I mean, I think everything was kind of by mistake. It's not like I never was thinking I'm going to be an entrepreneur. I just did stuff like when I dropped out of. So how far back do we want to go? Like I just did stuff. When I was in high school, I wanted to be on a sports team, right? Because I figured like if you go in sports team, you're more socially integrated into the high school. It seemed like a good idea, and I was naturally athletic, so I went to try out for some sports teams, but I was in this program called Boy Rangers when I was a little kid. I don't want to get into it. It's dramatic because it wasn't Boy Scouts. It was Boy Rangers. It was like some kind of weird thing based on Indians, and we had to advance from papoose to warrior by feats of strength, and it was, anyway. So I did that, and I didn't do, I ended up not doing like Little League and stuff. Yeah. So when it came to the sports, I didn't know any of the rules. I was like, okay, I'll try out. And I looked at the basketball court, and I was like, holy crap, there's all these lines, I don't know what to do. And then the baseball was like a religion. Yeah. And football, I didn't know how many tries do you get and all this stuff. And so I went to the administration, and I said, well, if I can get enough boys and a coach, can I start my own lacrosse team? Because they didn't have a lacrosse team. Because I figured if nobody knew how to play lacrosse, then I'd be good. Because and we'd all be clueless. In hindsight, I could have just learned the rules of one of the other sports, but I didn't. That didn't occur to me. So I started the lacrosse team, and then I was really good at lacrosse, and the other kids made me their captain, and I got what I wanted. And that's like an example of like, I wasn't trying to think like, I'm gonna be an entrepreneur, but I did learn a good lesson from that. I like to go back in my life and review it to get lessons. And the lesson learned there was that you can, that people usually think of opportunity as the way that it's defined in the dictionary, which is something like a set of circumstances that present themselves and come together such that you are able to take advantage of them. And that formation of the lacrosse team taught me that you can actually architect the circumstances if you take a step back from that definition. So that means you can manufacture opportunity. You don't have, people think of like people are good at waiting for opportunity or spotting opportunity, which is true. But you can also just make it for yourself, and then you're the only one uniquely positioned to take it. So
That's great.
So, that, like stuff like that. And then, when I got my first job as a designer, and that turned into me wanting to start my own studio, and that turned into somebody saying, do you do websites? I have a $5,000 budget, and me saying, of course. And then I had to figure out how to do websites. And then my friends who graduated, went into consulting, wanted to start a web company. In 1999, and they were like, you do web stuff, let's start. And then it just sort of tumbled into itself, Well, that's my short answer.
That's the long answer is in Biz's book. But so I think let's kind of carry this forward then. So you start your first company, Zanga. You work on that for a little while.
By the way, don't name a company that you then have to explain. It's called Zanga. It's spelled with an X. If you have to explain it, it's like a joke. It's not funny if you have to explain a joke.
So Zanga with an X. And then you left that. How did you then, find your way out west? Like, what was the allure of Silicon Valley? What sort of, attracted you to come out here? Biz was in Boston before.
Yeah, well, what happened was we started Zanga in New York City, and it was an early social networking type site, and Blogger came out, and I was like, oh, that's good. We should do that. And my other guys didn't want to do it. They thought it was dumb, and I was like, no, it's great. They wanted to start a site where we reviewed like our CD collection and our book collection, but I didn't have anything. So I was writing like adventures that I had in where you're supposed to write about the CD, and people were like, your things are funny and stuff, and I was like, yeah, I just need a place to write it. And then Blogger came out, and I was like, that's what we need. We need a place to just say whatever you want. And they were like, no. And I was like, yes. I was the designer, so I just designed it in. And then what happened was I think we were better than Blogger, because Blogger was like for nerds. You had to get your own FTP to your own site and all this. And Zanga was just you blog and you read your favorite blogs all in one place, and you're all connected, Yeah. And so what happened was I ended up reading Evan Williams' blog, and I started realizing like that I was totally philosophically aligned with this guy, not with my other guys, and the culture of Zanga just started going downhill. I didn't like the way it was going. Those guys were hiring their bros from their consulting jobs, and I was like, I don't like this, so I quit. And then I quit, and I moved back to Boston, and then I felt like I was immediately on the wrong side of the screen. And I was like, well, I screwed that up. And I even asked for my job back, and they were like, no. And I was like, dang. And I was like, I wanted to work with Evan. I was like, that's who I really want to work with. And I sort of visualized myself working with him. And then Google bought Blogger, and I just wrote him a note and said, I feel like I'm the missing 7th member of your team, or something like that. And he wrote back to me, how'd you like to come out and work here? And I was like,
okay, so
that sounds pretty good.
So it's never quite that simple. What, had you been blogging? What else did you put in the note that kind of made that? Because I think everybody here talks about sort of that magical cold email sort of working. How do you actually get to a point where the cold email actually does pop?
Well, it turns out I had been reading his blog, and I was like, wow, I'm really philosophically aligned with this guy. I was like legitimately excited about blogging. I really thought the democratization of information was a big deal. I was like, this isn't just good for me and makes me look like I'm smart and I know how to set up a website and look cool templates and stuff, but it's good for everybody. It's awesome, right? Yeah. Everyone's gonna have a voice. You don't need to know how to code to have a voice on the internet now.
Yeah.
And I was super excited about it. And everything Evan wrote, I was like, oh, this guy, exactly, that's what I mean. And it turned out he was reading mine too.
Got it.
So I never realized that possibility that he was actually liking my stuff. So he had been reading my stuff all along. He was following Zanga, he was following my blog. And so he was like, yeah, this guy knows what he's talking about too. And so, like you said, it wasn't that easy. We liked each other mutually. And he felt like I was the missing member of his team too. So it just hit at the right spot at the right time. And he pulled a lot of strings at Google because back in 2003, they weren't hiring dropouts who didn't know anything about computer science. They were hiring PhDs in computer science, but he managed to pull some strings and get me in there. So it wasn't Silicon Valley, it was Evan Williams.
Wow.
It was a person. I realized, looking back, that every significant choice I've ever made has been because I followed a person, not an organization or a thing. It was a person. I quit college because of Steve Snyder. I moved out here because of Evan Williams. You know, I walked away from Twitter after 5.5 years because of Evan Williams and Jason Goldman. You know, that kind of stuff. It's always a person.
No, that sounds great. It sounds like a big lesson too, is by putting yourself out there and blogging and writing and explaining who you are, you can actually get to know people a lot more before you actually meet them.
That was key. I mean, my blog got me my first couple of book deals, and I got no money for those first couple of books. Really, it was pittance, but it was books, so it looked like, oh, he's fancy and smart. He writes books. So that helped me get the job at Google. You know.
Wow. Okay. So now let's put a couple things together. You've dropped out. You've moved west because you've quit your job. You've moved west because of Ev. You walk into Google. You're one of the few sort of non-PhD GPA grades. If you were trying to get into Google in 2003, you had to submit your GPA and your college transcript many times.
Yeah, I skipped over all that though.
Yeah.
What happened was Evan got into this big argument, or it was Larry and Sergey were like, no way, dude. And he just kept fighting for me, which was awesome. And they were finally like, you're such a pest that they said, if Wayne Rosing says he likes him, then he can come. And Wayne Rosing was at the time like their director, their head guy of engineering. So he called me on the phone, and I explained to, Wayne was like, you don't have any education and this and that. And I explained to him that, yes, I did. I apprenticed. I dropped out of college because I apprenticed with this guy named Steve Snyder, and he taught me graphic design. And then I learned graphic design. I started designing websites, and then I started a company. And yes, the company didn't work out, but I think he respected the fact that I had tried and failed at a startup and everything else. So I think he gave me the thumbs up,
great,
which got me out there.
Cool. So now let's fast forward a couple of years and start talking about kind of what became Twitter. Here you are now at Google. Google's actually an incredible place, and you've worked at one of the biggest companies, that turned out to be even much bigger then, and yet you left to go start, I think, what was Odeo?
Yeah, it was
Odeo. Is that right?
Yeah.
Like, how did you know that was the right time to quit your job again and go start a company, with Evan? Yeah, well,
it was tough because I grew up on welfare, and my entire adult life I was in debt, and at that point I was, and when I got the job at Google, I got there just before they went public in 2003, and then they went public, and then I started being able to sell some of my shares, and so I was able to pay off my debt. And just as I paid off my debt, Evan Williams decided, he only had a 2-year deal and was part of the acquisition of Blogger or something, so he left. And then I was faced with another existential type question of, well, did I come out here to work at Google, or did I come out here to work with Evan Williams? And I always hash things out with my wife, and I was like, which one did I do? And the answer was clear. I had come out for Evan. What do I know from search, Yeah. So I was like, shit. I came out here to work with Evan Williams, and he's gone, so I got to keep working with Evan Williams. So And we had this idea. We used to carpool, and I said, you know, it's cool. You can record your voice in the browser with Flash, and we can convert Flash into MP3, right? And he was like, yeah. And I said, we could write a client that syncs MP3s to these new things called iPods that are getting popular, right? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, so we could sort of democratize audio like we did with Blogger. And he was like, that's a good idea.
Got it.
So it was a good idea. And anyways, the point is I followed Evan. Yet again, a person. I followed Evan.
And so you guys went to work on this company called Odeo, which is sort of a famous sort of flame out. It didn't work, you know.
It didn't really flame out. It's just that it didn't catch on fire. Okay, so it was like, oh.
Same thing.
Yeah, it was okay. It was like, we raised $5 million, and we could have kept going, but we had dinner well, first of all, we were trying to do everything. We were trying to be the podcasting studio in the browser. We were also trying to be where you went to find podcasts and all this stuff. Then Apple put podcasting in iTunes, and we're like, that's a good place for it. And they also came out with GarageBand and all this other stuff, and we're like, Flash, you know, and you're recording for like an hour, and then, sorry, browser crashed. It's like, so, and then Evan had this idea, like, well, we'll tweak it, and I forget what it was. I think it was like, we'll simplify, and we'll just be a directory or something like that. And we went out for whiskey and sushi, and I said, I think your plan is genius and great, and I think if it works, we'll be the kings of podcasting. And he was like, wow, you really think it's that good? And I was like, yeah, but here's my question. Do you want to be the king of podcasting? And he was like, oh, no, I don't. And he wished I hadn't said it, you know what I mean? Because what we realized was we didn't listen to podcasts, we didn't make podcasts. You got to remember, this was before like NPR and all these cool people were podcasting. It was just like some dude talking about XML for an hour. And then whenever we were like, we really should use our own thing. And we would set up a mic between us, and I'd be like, you go. And he'd be like, no, you go.
Just like we're doing here.
Yeah. And so that was another important lesson, which was you got to be emotionally invested in what you're doing. Like that, we weren't emotionally invested. So once we realized, even if we were to attain the summit, that we were the best podcasting people ever, that's not what we wanted.
Got it.
So then we knew we needed out. So then he told the board, like, I don't want to. I'll find another CEO. And they're like, no, we invested in you. And so, you know, that's what went on with that. I mean, if someone was into it, I think it would have been an okay company.
Got it. So then, you know, there's kind of a fabled story. You guys did this hackathon at Odeo.
That was Ev's idea, which was great, yeah.
So you do a hackathon, just let everybody be creative.
Yeah.
This thing called Twitter comes out of it. When did you have that moment that you never had with Odeo where you're like, you know what, this is great. I want to be the king of Twitter. We should be the kings of Twitter.
Well, there was a little moment and then a huge moment. Okay. We built Twitter for fun. Like, you know, I'm not going to go back. I'm not going to revise history and say we built Twitter to, you know, topple despotic regimes. We built Twitter for fun.
Okay.
And what happened was there was this one moment during the prototyping phase where I was ripping up carpeting in this little 400 square foot house we had bought with what little money I got for down payment from Google, which put me right back into debt. And I watched Bob Vila as a kid. So when you rip up the carpet, you reveal a beautiful hardwood floor underneath. And so I was doing that, and there was no hardwood floor underneath. So I was basically ruining my house, and I was sweating, and I was like, oh, this sucks. And then my phone buzzed in my pocket, and it was Ev, and his tweet was, sipping a Pinot Noir after a massage in Napa Valley. And I just laughed out loud at the incongruence of the two things, and my wife thought I'd lost it because I was swearing before that I was laughing. But the point was, I sort of had this out-of-body experience, like, you're laughing you're experiencing joy. You like what you're working on. That's great. And I was like, oh, I love what I'm working on. That's great. I'm doing the right thing. I'm laughing. And so that was like the little thing. The big, giant, life-changing, oh my God, we have a thing, was the March 2007 Austin, Texas story. But that little laughter thing was key.
Got it. And just
because when you're emotionally invested and you love what you're doing, then everyone who tells you your thing is stupid and never going to work and everything, you don't even hear that. Like somebody said, Twitter, at the time, somebody said, Twitter is like the Seinfeld of the internet. It's a website about nothing. And I was like, oh wow, let's put that on the front page. Seinfeld's great. Let's put that in our rotating testimonials. And someone was like, Biz, that's an insult. And I was like, what do you mean? Seinfeld's awesome. Seinfeld's like a hit show.
Well, I think that's actually, that comment right there really says a lot about sort of what you always brought to Twitter, really making it fun. Like, a lot of people kind of take themselves very, very seriously. They try to build these very serious products that do things. And yet Twitter always sort of had the fail whale. Or I remember at one point we were working together, we put on the homepage, it's a whole thing. Lots of people like it. We hope you join us.
It's a whole thing.
Like, can you talk a little about kind of bringing that spirit and that story and like why that's so important to you?
In fact, even in the very first design I did of Twitter, when you made a tweet, the confirmation page said, great, that might have worked. Because we really weren't sure if it was going to work. But yeah, all that fun stuff. The point of all, I mean, that's branding, really. I mean, what it is it's humanizing, and there's value in vulnerability. You show your human side. Like, yeah, we screwed up, we messed up. The fail whale was supposed to be an image of like, hey, it's a bunch of us, bunch of birds that are lifting a whale. We're all trying to fix it, like. Evan later pointed out, Biz, the birds are like flying in different directions, and I was like, yeah, that's kind of what it's like, though.
Yeah.
But every time something broke, I would go on the blog and I would say, I would act like an embedded reporter in our own company, and I would be like, what happened? And I would say, this happened, and so it's not going to break exactly this way again. It'll probably break some other way. Like Elon Musk recently, he's trying to build the rocket ship that can take off and land, and it exploded when it landed. And he sent out a tweet that said, well, it's not going to explode exactly that way next time. We know it won't explode that way. So it's kind of like that. You humanize it, you make it fun. And I really think, that ended up helping us, because there were clones that were better. And strong, and they stayed up and they worked, and people could have used those, but they were like, no, I kind of like this one. I like this one better. It feels like my favorite jeans. Like it comes down to branding through authenticity, I guess.
Got it. Well, and can you talk a little about culture? Because I think one of the other things that amazed me, when I came to work at Twitter, it was maybe 80-some employees, was the culture of the company felt more like a family than any other company I'd ever worked at. And some of the things, on the very first day, you and Ev kind of would give these assumptions. I just thought it'd be fun to kind of read these off and have you talk about them a little bit.
We used to give a we used to, the two of us would give a presentation to everyone joining, which was embarrassing because it showed how inept I was, because always in front of all these new smart people, I was trying to hook up the monitor and I could never do it right. And I was like, Ev will be here in a minute. It's his computer. I don't know. He must have done something weird to it, because it's not, I don't know what the...
But actually, you always said, there are more smart people out there than in here, which I think was like for the companies.
Well, just to contextualize this, the assumptions, the reason for the assumptions was this: we told everyone, look, you're not supposed to make assumptions, but people do it. You're gonna do it because people do it. So if you're gonna make assumptions, please make these.
Yeah.
That was the theory behind the assumptions, but they also communicated kind of what we were about and stuff too.
Because I just thought it was so different than sort of Google's culture or Facebook's culture, but it was very much about, there's more smart people outside than inside. There's, we're gonna win if we do the right things for users. We don't know what's gonna happen. We can build a business, change the world, and have fun.
Yeah.
How did you actually bring those things and really keep them in the culture? How do you think about that as you're building a new company?
Well, I mean, what you do is you write them down, you say them, you introduce them to the early employees become like, I mean, there's entrepreneur and there's entrepreneurial, right? You're entrepreneurial. You took a risk on joining a small company that would probably fail, you know? And so what you do is you indoctrinate the early employees with the things that you believe, and then they believe them, and then they go on, and then they teach the next ones, and that's how you keep it in. That's how you keep the culture in. And so you write them down, and then you just check yourself against them every time. Like, you know, every deal we do should be a win-win deal. I think that was another one of them. The idea is that, like, if somebody on one side is like, ha, we screwed the other guy, like we got, so that first of all, they're never gonna do business with you again, and other people are gonna hear about it and not wanna do business with you, and it's just, also it's not cool, and you know, it's like a relationship. If it's lopsided like that, it's not gonna work out. So you check yourself against those things. I always thought Google's thing was funny, don't be evil, because they were measuring themselves against a scale of evilness. It wasn't be good, it was don't be evil.
Yeah.
That's a whole different thing.
Yeah.
They could have said, let's be good, but no, they said, don't be evil. So what does that mean? Like, we're in the evil world now.
And
I don't know.
We're not that. No, it's great. And I think Twitter sort of has been the antithesis of the experience of being good for kind of most of its life. So it's much, much bigger, I'm sure, than you imagined in those early days when Ev was sipping Pinot Noir. You know, can you talk about, you know, when people did people try to acquire you along the way? Like, how did you know to say no? Like, how did you actually go through that experience? I think a lot of entrepreneurs, you know, may face that at some point in their journey.
Well, it's just, I mean, it came down to the fact that we were like, I mean, the answer really was we still felt like there was a lot of stuff we didn't do that we wanted to do, and it wasn't time to, you know, there's reasons why you sell your company. There's 3 reasons. Maybe there's more, but I think there's 3 reasons. 1, you're tired, you're done, you just want your money and you want to be like rich and quit, right? We weren't that. 2, you're about to be like totally crushed by the competitors or sued into oblivion, and you really need someone to save you. And 3, the offer is something higher than you could ever imagine yourself potentially ever reaching, like 10 times higher than your wildest dreams that you could ever think yourself reaching. And there was all these Yahoo talked to us really early on about acquiring us for $10 million. And I just remember we took the meeting, and then we just walked back to the office, and Evan said, okay, well, that was the time we didn't sell to Yahoo. I remember him saying that. That was the time, he said, okay, well, that was the time we didn't sell our company to Yahoo. And then there was the other time when the funnier one. Should I tell that story about Mark?
You can tell it quickly, yeah.
I'll tell it fast, the time's going down. But I got to the office, and Goldman said, I was waiting for you downstairs, and I said, why? And he said, just go. And I went down, and he's waiting in his car, and I got in the car, and I said, where are we going? He said, Palo Alto. I said, why? He said, to meet Mark Zuckerberg. I said, Zuckerberg? Why are we meeting at Mark Zuckerberg? He said, he wants to talk about, like, acquiring us. And I was like, what? Are we for sale? And he was like, no. And I was like, well, why are we doing it? He's like, I don't know. I said I would. And then I was like, well, we don't want to sell it though, right? And he was like, no. And I was like, I have an idea. And he said, what? And I said, we'll just come up with a crazy number so high that that is like absolutely ridiculous. And he was like, that's a pretty good idea. Like, how high? And I was like, $500 million. And we laughed because that was literally the highest number I could think. I couldn't even think of a higher, bigger number. And we really laughed and we couldn't breathe. We were laughing so hard. And because we couldn't keep our site up. We thought we were worth like $5 million. And then we got to the point where Mark was like, well, we got into a little room with him and he was like, it was awkward too because he took the chair, then there was one with the love seat, and Ev and I had to squish it. Ev and I were like, huh. And he said, he was all cool about it, and he was like, I don't like to talk about numbers. And Ev was like, neither do we. and he was like, and then Mark said, but if you say a number, I can say yes or no. And Ev looked at me, and then he looked at Mark, and he said, $500 million? And Mark said, that's a big number. And I said, you said yes or no? And then he was like, well, let's go have lunch. And we sort of just left it, and then we didn't have lunch. We were, because there was a long line, and I said, Ed, we got that thing. And then we ended up having to, Ev had to write like a really nice, thoughtful note to Mark saying like, we're sorry, we shouldn't have taken the meeting. We still feel like we have a lot of work left to do and stuff. And that lesson learned, you really shouldn't accept the meeting if you don't intend to do that, It was kind of a jerky thing to do.
That's a great story though.
I know, it made for a good story.
So take the meeting for the story.
Right, exactly.
So ultimately, Twitter obviously becomes this great success. The company grows and scales. There's a whole bunch of other parts of the Twitter story that we can skip past. You eventually leave the company and you can just graduate, and you talked about kind of being rich, and being in a different place in your life, and yet you're back founding another company again. Like what is the urge to go build Super and to bring a team together, raise money from investors, and try to build something again?
I mean, yeah, I don't know, you're supposed to have a job when you're a man, I guess, or an adult. Ben is my co-founder, and we're really good friends, and we came up with this, what we thought was a really great idea, and we ran it by Jack and other smart people, and they were like, oh, that's a great idea. And I was like, shit, now we have to start a company, we're gonna do it again? And I got kind of nauseous, and so we started a company called Jelly, which was supposed to be a new kind of search engine based on the fact that most information isn't on the web, it's actually in people's heads, and that phones are the hyperlinks of humanity. And that didn't work. And then Super is something that I'm really, really emotionally invested in, and I really, really love, and we're laughing every day at the office, and we're having a lot of fun, and I love every single one of the people I work with. I would not mind being stuck in an elevator for the weekend with every single guy. I love them all, and I wake up and I'm like, yay, I get to go in and hang out with those guys again. I mean, that's like a dream scenario. Most people don't get to do that.
Yeah. And tell us a little about what Super does.
Well, Super gets me back to my roots as an artist. Super, I just said, well, let's do something crazy and just wild and different, and even if it's like hard to use and figure out, screw it. I was inspired by the artist Barbara Kruger, who you don't know by name, but you probably know what I'm talking about. She does these pieces where she takes a big black and white picture and then she just has a red bar across it, and her most famous one is I shop, therefore I am. And it's just this very bold statements. And so what we wanted to do is since Q&A wasn't working, I said, well, let's just do A and Q, let's just let people express themselves, but I'm a firm believer that constraints inspire creativity, so let's give people some constraints. So the reason it's called Super is because originally, the first prototype started you off with superlative statements like the best, the worst, the sexiest, the craziest. Those are superlative statements. Chopped it off, called it Super. And now it's like, we added a bunch more like I love and stuff like that. And the idea is, we start you off with I love, you finish it, or the best. And so you say the best the best espresso comes from Italy. We also assume you're lazy, so while you're typing, we're doing a Google image search, and so that you hit next, there's espressos behind that, and you wouldn't have tweeted that maybe,
Yeah.
and you wouldn't Instagram someone else's picture, but together they form this little unit that's a kind of a work of art and a thought you would not otherwise have expressed. Brian Kadar, who's on my team, is Jewish, and he's very religious, and he read this is kind of a downer, but he read this recent piece that came out about Auschwitz, and what he did was he took the image from the article, and he just used he didn't even write anything, he just used one of our starters. Unbelievable, he put on it. And so immediately I knew that article struck him emotionally, and it was a compelling looking piece of art. And he pushed that out to Twitter and stuff, and you can make a link to stuff on Super, so if I wanted to, I could read the article, but I immediately knew, like, he was emoting, you know? And, you know, that's what it's all about. It's about a new way to express yourself that, you know, it makes ordinary content extraordinary. It takes ordinary people's thoughts and makes them extraordinary kind of artists. And it's all about that. It's about getting those thoughts out that you wouldn't otherwise get out. And then maybe, who knows, 15 years down the line, we'll have this huge corpus of what the best things are and what the worst things are. And, you know, it'll be useful. But, that's the other thing is, I know we're running out of time, but one quick thing, good lesson learned is, if something's fun, then it's more likely people will use it. If a lot of people use it, then it has the potential of becoming important. So Snapchat was just fun, Facebook was just for fun, Twitter was just for fun, and then when 100 million people start using it, it's a big deal, it's important. But if you try to start off immediately with important, it's like doing homework, like nobody wants to do that. No. So that was the problem with Jelly. People were actually doing homework on Jelly. They were literally like doing their homework. How do I do this math problem? I was like, oh God, you know. So you got to make something fun, and then if you're lucky, it'll become important.
That's great. Look, I think we all owe a huge bit of gratitude to Biz, both for sharing these thoughts and for helping create Twitter and really and Super and showing us these things.
Super.me, try it out.
Super.me, try it out, and if you
it.
have a little bit of fun, it can go on to create big things and connect humanity. So thank you, Biz, for
Thank you, Josh. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.